Hey guys, welcome to another commentary done by Diggity. 3 o'clock location. We have DuckloadRA starting as the blue protoss, aka WhiteRa. I have to be very careful not to mix those names up, otherwise it gets NSFW pretty quickly. Duckload, though, a great sponsor, and I just love that name, Duckload. Go check it out. Search on Google, etc. 6 o'clock location, we have DignitasSjow starting as the red terran. This is on TerminusRE, NASL Division 2 Week 2 match of the day. Hope you guys enjoy it. Special thanks to NASL for getting me this replay. Check out NASL.tv. They have matches essentially every day. $25 for a pass, and they're improving very, very rapidly. This is TerminusRE, and I think it's an extremely difficult map for Protoss players in particular, because you have a very wide ramp, so it becomes difficult to block off. If you have any sort of early pressure, it is a little bit wider, but nevertheless, that early Marauder push in significant numbers, you need additional sentries to force field this ramp. On top of that, it's extremely wide natural. So plenty of positioning for big infantry battles. And on top of that, yes, you have the third, but it's only got a single gas. And on top of that, it's just a gimme. Once you have siege tanks positioned here, a Terran mech army gets really brutal really quickly. And then when you're talking about the center of the map, you don't have a lot of high ground, low ground action to work with. This is where really in any little corridors, huge corridors basically, sentries somewhat limited in those huge corridor spaces. They have to rely on just kind of open ground to split armies in half. And on top of that, you can't really effectively use Colossi to hop up and down any sort of areas to end up with an advantage as far as engagements go in that regard. So sometimes I've seen Protoss try to compensate by going air, but nevertheless, big wide open field, so you have to rely on Phoenix speed rather than any sort of ground positioning. And on top of that, Medevac and Vikings over this this open expanse, still very strong. So I feel like Sjow should be able to do something interesting here, and basically it's up to WhiteRa to come up with something creative. The thing though for Sjow, WhiteRa, so consistent, really fantastic player. Orbital Command is upgrading, still no gas. WhiteRa sees the fact that there's no gas. Looks like, wow, perfect timing. Probe actually exiting the base just as that Marine spawns, and it should be able to exit with plenty of health. Looks like it is able to do so. But Sjow looks like he wants to open up expansion first. Very wise on this build, because I assume that WhiteRa is going to open up with a more infantry-heavy opening. So and it looks like he is grabbing a second gas, perhaps to get some sentries out, building a Zealot precautiously first. SCV checking things out, has seen that second gas planted, and is now going to back off. One pylon hidden behind this gas just in case something was able to sneak back there, and I think that's nice preventative play from WhiteRa. I gotta say, WhiteRa, been around forever, is a really tough competitor, is a really intelligent competitor. DignitasSjow, now that expansion up and running, also tacking on a bunker just to provide some additional defense, which leads me to believe he's going to be teching hard. So there's one refinery. I almost wonder if he's going to plant a second behind this. Usually you see a bunker like this, and you have to assume, okay, well, if he's bunkering up off a fast expansion, that means he's not going to follow up with a heavy amount of infantry, particularly when he's seen what he's seen in WhiteRa's base. And that's got to be a tip to WhiteRa that there's some sort of tech behind this, because currently one gateway, that's not a significant threat. Looks like WhiteRa has expanded. He's denying information to Sjow in the meantime. Zealot and Stalker moving forward. Looks like plenty of Marines in that bunker to provide additional defense, and SCVs can come off the line, no problem to repair this. Stalker just going to sit up at that staging position to try to deny information for further forward, and it looks like Zealot just going to back off the home base, probably take over that Zenlag watchtower. And now there is that second gas indeed. Second barracks before, though, the second gas being planted, and it looks like an additional gateway for WhiteRa, 2 additional gateways for WhiteRa. And my question is how does he transition from this stage? Does he try to take that third base before we see Sjow pushing out and doing some sort of action? Is he going to try to take the economic lead? Is he going to go up, provide some pressure? How is he going to apply pressure on a very difficult map? Looks like factory now in production for Sjow. I assume we're going to see a heavier mech opening, but currently looks like Sjow just filtering through with a lot of Marines. Orbital Command now up and operational at his natural expansion. Economically, he's doing fantastically, and sorry, forgetting to bring up my tabs here well into the match. Robo is up and running for WhiteRa. Looks like that Nexus just about finishing too, so that should even things up a little bit economically. And really what I want to see, and it looks like this is a kind of a delayed 3-gate into expand build. Obviously the expansion went up first, but having the preventative troop base to follow this up. And really I think the key for WhiteRa is just being able to sneak in that first observer, see what his opponent's up to, and continue from there. Currently he does have the supply lead. Looks like we are seeing a starport tech lab along that factory, and I'm wondering if we're going to see a switch and an open up to Banshee to just abuse this back edge. Again, air still very viable for Protoss. In the meantime, we do have a handful of sentries on the front, still not enough to provide a full blockade, so let's see if WhiteRa continues to produce the sentries on the front. It looks like he's actually gone for a Sentry Zealot combination. There's that initial observer, which could limit the cloaking ability if we do in fact see a Banshee, but it looks like we do not. We see a Siege Tank with Siege Tech to opening up, and I almost wonder if we're going to see early Medivacs. Looks like no. Okay, Tech Lab. So this almost looks like we're going to go into the full complement, the Marine Siege Tank, and then perhaps Raven start to really neutralize early Stalker play. Unfortunately, WhiteRa has gone Sentry Zealot to start, which is really going to put a damper on this build for Sjow. Especially, well, let's see if he goes Raven first. Going to wait for that tech maneuver in just a moment here. In the meantime, the observer wandering in the field, seeing lots of supply depots planted, seeing the bunkers, etc. And this is also another decision point for Sjow, is does he expand into WhiteRa to take that additional gas, or does he in fact take this safer natural expansion even though it's one gas short? And it looks like we are seeing a Raven to open with that Tech Lab along the corner, and I wonder if WhiteRa is just going to plant that observer there to see what comes out. It looks like he's actually going to move it around the base. WhiteRa is now taking the economic lead, going for an additional Nexus. Looks like he's going to be in the defensive slot, and I feel like he's going to be very successful in that defensive slot, particularly with this Raven Siege Tank Marine opening. Marine starting to push off. That Stalker has seen it. It is backing off. And I don't know that they're going to have a lot of success here. There are a handful of Stalkers out in the field, but that Raven is going to be out a ways of time. But really the bulk of this army is those Zealots in combination with those force fields, and I almost wonder how they're going to be successfully executed. And I think that's going to be the trick, is this nice force field concavity to make those Zealots even more worthwhile. So essentially the Marines just can't stim pack and walk back. But also keep in mind the Tech Lab just starting, so it's going to be a ways before we see stim pack or the combat shield upgrades. And it looks like Sjow planted that supply depot along the corner, so I ended up losing it. Every little bit counts at this stage. Raven now out in the field as well, and he is taking his third base, perhaps feeling safe now that Raven's out in the field, just in case any additional huge Stalker attack was moving out. In the meantime, WhiteRa starting to get that Robo, pumping the Colossi. Third base up and running, and still hasn't transferred probes out that direction. As far as flat supply count goes, it looks like he's got plenty of harvesters. He's just been chrono boosting those probes away. Getting that thermal lance upgrade about halfway finished, and also getting double forge to try to play that early, to play heavy infantry basically, and have a big infantry lead as far as just pure upgrades go. Level 1 weapons just now starting for Sjow. And it looks like he is going to follow up with a Banshee. I'm curious how successful this will be. 2 forges in that back corner. WhiteRa preventatively having some Stalkers in the back corner, so it looks like he's anticipating Sjow, or perhaps just seeing Sjow, period. And it looks like, yeah, very well practiced against this build or some sort of similar style that Sjow is executing here. And it looks like he's just a step ahead. He has a slightly larger flat macro, as far he's got 115 versus 107. He's got 63 harvesters compared to 48, and between mules that still puts Sjow a little bit of ahead. But when you're talking about Colossi and open field engagements with the supply count lead, it's not huge. It's not all that significant. Observer is seeing that third base. The next move, I think, is though WhiteRa, whether he wants to engage this or whether he's going to risk a third base. In the meantime, he is teching up hard, getting a lot of gateways. It looks like he's going to go very infantry heavy off 2 bases, and we are going to, off 3 bases. So we are going to see some heavy 3-base play. That is very typical for TerminusRE. Basically, both players sitting back, seeing who can macro faster. Right now, it's very, very close. 5 supply within both bounds. Not a lot of Marauders out in the field. Looks like just 3, but we should see a heavier Marauder count now that we see 3 Tech Labs out on these barracks. Additionally, a reactor to pump out additional Marines, and a lot of upgrades going. Looks like Destructible Rock was taken to the north base. You can see kind of covering that corner. Sjow moving up, so he wants to try to expand into WhiteRa, looks like, taking up some stock and a nice kind of coverage of this low ground. Very enclaved. It's going to be very difficult for WhiteRa to engage this situation just because he's so bunkered in. Several Colossi out in the field, a 3 count, not overcommitted here. More Stalkers warping in as well. That will make that Raven even more effective with the point defense drone. So it could be a very dangerous engagement for WhiteRa. Really, the critical thing, though, is there's no Vikings to deal with the Colossi. Those will be the XR. Guardian Shield moving up. No point defense drone yet. Banshee is wailing at things down below, and a lot of those Marines melting. There's a point defense drone, but that came very late in that fight. Extremely late, and as he's moving out, looks like that was picked off. Wow, terrible engagement for Sjow. completely losing his army and did not execute well there. First of all, Marines everywhere. He did not engage these Colossi. These Colossi at full health. Siege tanks did not focus, was not sieged. Point defense drone extremely late in that battle, and he just got crushed, absolutely crushed. WhiteRa just crashing down at his natural expansion. Is this going to be it? There is a single siege tank in the back corner. There is an additional Guardian Shield. Now the point defense drone out, and that should help nullify, and WhiteRa should actually back off from this fight. Instead, he's full on engaging it and expending a lot of troops, not focusing on the additional point defense drone. I almost wonder if he's even focusing on this fight up front. Just a couple of troops doing a ton of damage, and that siege tank has been sitting there forever. SCV's coming off the line, however, and it looks like WhiteRa is finally going to back off. He's still A-okay, though. He does have another base going up. He has absolute map control. Still, I feel like he could have backed off that attack a little bit and not expended as many troops as he did in that engagement. Additional Colossi now pushing out, and he also lost 2 Colossi that he did not need to lose there, I have to say. And look, granted, though, he might have won the match, and he might have been able to break through, so perhaps a little bit worth it. But it just looked like, between that point defense drone, also this idle siege tank that has 4 kills, and I think a couple of those were Colossi. Very dangerous situation for WhiteRa. Now Sjow needs to do something to try to catch up economically. He is well behind as far as the flat macro count goes. Built several Vikings to try to contend with those Colossi. I believe he lost the Raven in the midst of that fight, but he's got these 2 medevacs. I highly suggest, well, I guess he can't hear me, but I'm hoping he'll utilize them to sneak back here, do some damage, and then maybe swing back rapidly, just in case there is a counterattack from WhiteRa. The problem for him is he's got such a low supply count that it's very risky to push out with any sort of army. Because there's the very scary potential of a counterattack, is really what it comes down to. So now some probes starting to saturate. Keep in mind, this is a full gas base. Gas very precious at this stage. Stalkers just waiting for these dropships. And I don't think they're blink upgraded, though. So they're still going to be able to drop. Cannon trying to warp in. One probe coming off the line just to provide some distraction attack. I'm not sure what that was about. But wow, a lot of Stalkers dying here. WhiteRa still morphing in some additional Zealots. And dealing with this attack very well. He's happy to expend Stalkers. But still, Sjow still able to cream through this. WhiteRa not dedicating enough. And now Sjow lifting off. He's going to be able to get that medevac out there. Didn't lose forges, fortunately, and trying to pick off a couple medevacs here and there. But a bit of a null drop there. Still fist-fighted it out, lost a couple troops, but critically, he did not take out any probes. And WhiteRa is happy to lose as many Stalkers and Zealots as WhiteRa is willing to throw at this problem. Wow, moving in for another heavy drop. 4 medevacs pressing in. I like WhiteRa actually scouting the 9 o'clock location with this probe just to make sure that Sjow did not sneak an additional expansion. That would be another evening factor. 2 photon cannons warping in. Oh, this is a huge drop. This is going to be critical for Sjow if he can come back in this match. Medevacs overhead. WhiteRa needs to bring his entire army back. It is completely out of position, though. And wow, a lot of Marauders. They could take out this Nexus very rapidly. They could also take out these forges to slow down those upgrades. And that will be absolutely critical. 1 forge down. Looks like that second forge also down. Let's see if he can move back up, get these Medevacs out. And actually, wow. Excellent attack. Only a single... Oh, no! Never mind. Actually, no, that was correct. One of the medevacs was hidden. Only a single medevac taken out there. Great attack from Sjow. Did a lot of economic damage, and critically, he took down those 2 forges, and that is going to slow down the upgrades, and that is absolutely huge at this stage of the match. Sjow moving back around, this time with several Vikings to contend. He's going to drop right in the back of WhiteRa's base as he's completely out of position once again. Oh my goodness. And Sjow might be able to take this match with another amazing drop in the back. Stalkers there to try to engage. Let's see if they're able to pick off any of the 2 of the medevacs down very rapidly, but plenty of Marauders underneath these Stalkers actually trying to micro their way back. More troops warping in. This army trying to back up to try to support this. Probes. Zealots now joining the fight. The Colossi somewhat vulnerable to these Vikings in open field. The Marauders microing their way back into the wall. Sjow needs to win this fight, otherwise he's just going to end up falling too far behind. Colossi now walking through this just uncontested. A lot of the Vikings have been taken out. The medevacs down as well, and it looks like WhiteRa has defended. And that is going to be essentially GG. Nice attempt by Sjow, but now WhiteRa expanding to the 9 o'clock location. Bringing up the economy tab, you can see the gas highly in favor of WhiteRa, and also the minerals. Wow, 1740 comparative to 920 for Sjow, and he's starting to starve out egregiously. He has that natural expansion and that third base, but that main completely mined out. Starting to stage up to take this third. He desperately needs this. Guardian shield up. Looks like there's going to be a serious engagement here. Zealots on the front line. Splash damage from the tanks everywhere. The Stalkers up on the high ground, blinking down right on top of the siege tanks. Beautiful play from WhiteRa. It looks like those siege tanks melting. Still plenty of Marauders left, but they're going to have to contend with Zealots moving up to provide some support. There's also still a Colossus standing. And the Zealots charging through the Marauders, fleeing for their lives. The command center floating out. Wow, getting ahead of itself. It's probably going to get taken out. And Sjow is in desperate measure. He should probably GG in a second here because he's just going to get starved out. And he's going to have a burning command center on his hands in very short period of time here. Zealots charging all the way into this third base. The Zealots getting taken out. Or sorry, the Marauders getting taken out. There's GG from Sjow. Really well played by WhiteRa, especially on a map that I think is very difficult for Protoss. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for listening.